if you tried to create a perfect centre-back partner for Harry Maguire in a laboratory, you'd end up with a player with many of the qualities Raphael Varane has.
I think we better start, Carl, with the deal that has just been announced for Raphael Varane. You had written about it at length. It's now happening. It's not completely done yet because they still have to undergo a medical, finalise all the terms, make sure he's got his visa, fly over, observe his quarantine period, and then I'm sure he'll be holding up that Manchester United shirt to complete a relatively long saga. But the actual saga involving a Real Madrid centre-back in recent years has been Sergio Ramos. Well, Manchester United have ended up with Raphael Varane. And I'd like your thoughts on that, because in the piece you've written that's on The Athletic, people can go and have a read of it. It's not as clear-cut as Manchester United are signing one of the best centre-backs in the world and it's going to be a raging success. There are two sides to this story.
Yes, I think there are wrinkles to the signing of Varane. Please take this not as a comment on his qualities as a centre-back. He is very much one of the most decorated centre-backs in world football right now. He's one of the most talented centre-backs in world football right now. I think if you tried to create a perfect centre-back partner for Harry Maguire in a laboratory, you'd end up with a player with many of the qualities Raphael Varane has. So he's got blessed with incredible recovery pace, which would allow any football club that had him to play with a higher line, which we know Ole Gunnar Solskjaer desires. He's very good in one-on-one defending, so he's very good in his duels, both on the ground and in the air. He's very capable at both marking a man and also marshalling the space, which is something that Manchester United have been trying to get better at. If Michael Cox has once written this fantastic article about how some defenders are a bit like dogs in how they run off like a terrier of a man, and some more like cats waiting and pouncing at the opportune moment. And Varane, a bit like Harry Maguire, is quite skilled at both. So this is a partnership that arguably has the potential to be one of the best defensive partnerships since the days of Rio Ferdinand and Nemanja Vidic. On paper, at least, it looks like a match made in heaven. There are more issues as a cohesive unit in terms of how they defend, which means you can probably see quite a few Manchester United fans now turning their attention to a defensive midfielder, someone who can work as a stopper to protect Raphael Varane and Harry Maguire, and also to work essentially as a pressure valve, because Manchester United do want to press higher up the pitch and do want to be a team that plays with a little bit more aggression and can camp themselves in the team's final third. And to do that, you often need a number 6 style defensive midfielder who, if anything, sort of gets past, can immediately make that tackle and sustain that pressure. So good work, but job's not finished.
Yeah, and we'll come on to talk about the defensive midfielder and potential other positions later on in the show. It's worth pointing out that Varane, in your piece, has had some injury issues. His form, perhaps in the last couple of years, hasn't been as great as it was prior. I think you mentioned the 2014 to 18 period. And he's 28 years old. He's going to be signing a 4-year contract with an option of a 5th. He only had a year left on his Real Madrid contract. So while this 50 million euros deal, which includes add-ons, around 34 million pounds plus add-ons, is seemingly good business for Manchester United, it is quite a high fee for somebody that was going into his final 12 months and unwilling to renew. You could have got him for free next summer. I personally think it's going to be a really exciting signing and the sort of player that Manchester United needed, and I can't wait to see how it pans out. However, I think at the end of your piece, you do point out that United have made quite a few high-profile signings previously, really big names in world football, and they haven't worked out. So we do need to be aware that it's not all rosy in the garden. For want of a better cliche, the proof will be in the pudding.
I think you once said you should judge a football team by their activity at the end of the transfer window rather than during. The interesting thing about Varane is obviously there's the popular conception that he was the number 2 centre back to Sergio Ramos. He was the Robin to Ramos's Batman. And then what was also interesting is when he played for France, especially during their World Cup winning campaign, he was the senior centre back to Samuel Umtiti, and both Ramos and Umtiti have suffered some injury as well, which creates this very interesting perception of him as well. Is he a leader or is he someone that defers to the other centre-back? I think what's particularly interesting, especially last season, he very much held together a Real Madrid defence that was missing Sergio Ramos for large parts of that season, and had defenders that are not normally regarded as some of the world's best. So we know he has within him to make the step up and to be the senior centre-back and to be a very, very good leader and a vocal leader, which I think Manchester United will need, especially on things like set pieces.
If you're not yet an Athletic subscriber, you can currently join for a third off the price of annual subscription. That's less than £1 or $1 per week for all of our comprehensive football coverage, as well as US sports, boxing, golf and more, all in one place. You can find that link in our description. Now, before we get back to Carl, a question for you guys. Where will Manchester United finish in the Premier League this coming season? Let us know in the comments below. We talked about Jadon Sancho for an inordinate amount of time, and he's now a Manchester United player. That year-long pursuit, perhaps it went back even longer in terms of their interest, is over. He's a Manchester United player, perhaps not in the number that we thought. He wanted the number 7 shirt. I think he's got the 2 and the 5, the 25 to make the 7 in total. But do you think he is the player that Manchester United need? They were targeting that right-sided attacker for a long time. We've seen what he's done with Borussia Dortmund. He's earned the right to have this amazing opportunity now. He didn't have the Euros that many people were expecting, but there's enormous excitement about his arrival at Old Trafford.
Yes, sealed with a kiss. To reference a slightly infamous tweet. Jadon Sancho's arrival at Manchester United is Manchester United both securing a top-tier talent and addressing a massive area of need. So if you look at United, essentially the departure of Angel Di Maria, they have had problems on the right-hand side. Memphis Depay didn't quite work. He got lost in the sort of organizational shuffle of Louis van Gaal and Jose Mourinho, and unfortunately there were some failings there in regards to pastoral care. Then you had Alexis Sanchez, which didn't work for a myriad of reasons, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has had to make do with a combination of Daniel James, who is a left winger, Marcus Rashford, who is a left-sided forward, and Mason Greenwood, who everyone expects will play down the middle last season. So the idea that Sancho will play on the right, not only is more or less any right-sided attacker good, but it's the idea that you've got one of the best young right-sided attackers, which will be reason to be very, very excited. I think Jadon Sancho is the sort of signing that has the transformative potential that could take Manchester United just out of eye line from top 6 or top 4 chasers such as Leicester and the North London Cubs, and should in theory, injuries permitting and whatnot, should in theory make Manchester United a more consistent top 4 quality football club. What's very interesting about Manchester United last season was essentially how a lot of teams voided the space on the right-hand side. Such was the lopsided nature of United's attack, very often using Harry Maguire to Luke Shaw and then progressing the ball with overlaps and overlapping runs down Marcus Rashford. You saw quite a few teams that would essentially leave the right-hand side, leave Aaron Wan-Bissaka in quite large amounts of space, and then up to man-mark players on the left and the centre. We saw this against Burnley at Old Trafford, where I heard Sean Dyche say, don't get cut in the centre, just pack one area. And then Manchester United fans will also remember the Europa League final against Villarreal, where Villarreal essentially man-marked every single member of United's front 6 apart from the area on the right-hand side, because they did not believe Aaron Wan-Bissaka to be a threat. That will not be able to continue, because Jadon Sancho is of such an attacking quality and is so good at dribbling that you almost want to put 2 men on him when he picks up the ball in deep areas, which should in theory open up space for other attackers as well. One big question, however, hanging over Manchester United is Paul Pogba, because he's going into the final year of his contract. There's a really insightful, detailed, balanced piece on The Athletic written by Ollie Kay. I would urge people to go and have a look at that. It really encapsulates the whole dilemma for Manchester United. 3 options. Let him see out his final year and leave as a free agent for the second time in his Manchester United career. Sell him if there's a market, which is only likely probably to be Paris Saint-Germain at the moment, for a knockdown price, which might be a bitter pill to swallow, but some money might be better than nothing. Or give him and Mino Raiola the money that they want to renew his contract, which may settle him for the season ahead, hopefully give him the platform to have a brilliant season as United push on to try and win honours with their new team. But it's going to come at great expense for a player who, it hasn't been the fairy tale that many people would have expected in his second spell at Manchester United. So, Carl, where do you see this going? This is going to go right down to the wire in my interpretation. I can't see any quick fix to this one. I think it was potentially relying on any other possible signings coming through the door. I think one of the big things for Manchester United and Manchester United fans recognise is a holding midfielder would benefit not only players such as Scott McTominay and Fred, but it'd also massively be beneficial to Paul Pogba. If Manchester United were to give the money to Mino Raiola and to make the true contract bid for Paul Pogba, I think what would also be necessary is Manchester United to buy that sort of holding midfielder that he wants. I think a player like Fred now or a player like Scott McTominay have demonstrated that they can work as a shuttler. I think Scott McTominay, especially in the 6-2 victory over Leeds, has shown that his ultimate destiny is probably closer to goal as a number 8. So there is that need for a Matic replacement or a Matic upgrade. Unfortunately, Matic is 32 years of age. He's got a lot of miles on the clock, relatively speaking. So there is that gap of a holding midfielder, and I think regardless of any sort of contract negotiation, whether Pogba stays or Pogba goes, United will need that holding midfielder. I will not hide my love of Paul Pogba and watching him. I think he's a fantastic football player. He plays football very much in the style that I very much enjoy watching football. Dynamic passing, lovely dribbling and goal creation. He is not a gentleman that particularly enjoys defending. And like many midfielders over 6 foot, he can sometimes be used as a pressing target for other teams. So there have been instances from clubs such as Southampton who often try and double up to him and can win the ball back quite quickly. We saw this in Euro 2020 where he lost the ball that ultimately gave way to Switzerland's goal. So if Manchester United were to try and retain Paul Pogba, more work would need to be done, not just in terms of contract negotiations for him, but would also need to be done in terms of recruiting the sort of player to properly allow Pogba to play closer to his France iteration. Pogba's a very strange player in that there is sunk cost fallacy in terms of spending more money on him in terms of contract, but there isn't enough sunk cost in terms of giving him the midfield partner. Whether or not you want to do that, I think every Manchester United fan has their own opinion there. And I think, like many complicated situations, there's reasonable merit for 2 or 3 conclusions after this.
Yeah, Ollie wrote in that piece how influential N'Golo Kante has been next to him for France, but also other players in the French team, let's make no mistake. There were some whispers in the past about Kante joining Manchester United, even last summer. So it will be very interesting to see what happens, because as I understand it, at the start of this summer's window, Manchester United's 3 priorities were the right-sided attacker, the centre-back, and also a holding midfielder. So that feels to me like it's going to be the focus of conversation. Of course, there are other sort of subsidiary positions as well, such as the right back, with Kieran Trippier among the options who United have been considering, and that's well documented. Let's finish with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Another piece you've written, another one for people to go and read, is his new contract. And I think you're basically saying, as the headline indicates, they're going all in on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer with this new deal. Now, I can't move for radio phone-ins and comments on social media and articles questioning this decision, wondering if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is the right man to lead United forward, pointing to the Villarreal final, the semi-final the previous year, certain instances over the last season or so when Manchester United, even when they've won, haven't played in the style that many fans would like to see. Now with these new signings and a lot of talent throughout the team, could a different manager get more out of them? But the fact is that United have put their chips on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and that is a huge moment, and he now needs to deliver.
Very much so. I think this is a very interesting contract where it can be both considered a reasonable reward for the work already done. So you look at the progression Solskjaer has done and the way he's got a highly dysfunctional football club, and I use the word club rather than team, because I wish to talk about the overall setup, not just from the first team, but also the academy, and also things such as the scouting unit, and also things such as the medical team and whatnot, how he's got that closer to what they used to do. Solskjaer's greatest strength has been restoration and essentially going, this is what we used to do. And whilst his constant referencing of Alex Ferguson may vary in terms of how much you either laugh or eye roll, I think there is merit in doing that and saying this is what Alex Ferguson did, and we should do these things, and we should go back to upholding some of the ideals that have kept Manchester United the way they were. Now the great challenge is for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to show that he can show what Manchester United will be in the future, and that future will be one of winning titles rather than just losing in semi-finals. Manchester United's first team use a number of tactical systems that can seem circumstantial at first, and then very quickly look by design. Solskjaer once used the term layer by layer after their victory against Liverpool in the FA Cup, and what you can often see is very much, he described it like the painting of a house. And I think I now use this to describe this team, where often, if anyone's renovated house, you often have that moment where everything looks like a chaotic mess because you're trying to throw things out, and then things very quickly make sense once you thin things out again. And I think Solskjaer is approaching that stage now. I no longer have to squint so hard or talk my head to go, what is this football team doing? I think the thing with United in the previous 2 full seasons under Solskjaer was they had very much Pyrrhic victories in terms of, if Manchester United played in this fashion again, they would not win a game of football. I think what's reassuring is not only has this new contract shown that United are all in on Solskjaer, but also Solskjaer is getting the pieces he needs.
Very briefly, as an outsider and impartial observer, it's inconceivable to me with these reinforcements that Manchester United finishing without a trophy next season would be acceptable. Is that the same for you? What's the minimum expectation?
Listeners to Talk of the Devils will know Andy Mitten has his standard of excellence, which is top 4 in a trophy. I think these signings of Varane and Sancho make United a more consistent force in the top 4. In terms of a trophy, I still don't think United have enough to win the Premier League, unfortunately. I can see these new signings taking United from a point sort of 74 to closest to 80 or 82. I can't quite see the extra 4, possibly even 6 they need to best Manchester City or what looks like a very ominous and resurgent Chelsea. So I think Manchester United will be relying on a favourable draw in the domestic cups and then possibly something in the Champions League. Anything can happen in the cups and whatnot. And I think the United you saw last season, that was very much left-sided dominant and very much frail on defensive set pieces, is unlikely to return this season. So anything can happen.